A very good morning to all of you, and a great pleasure being here this morning. It's only when you reflect back on number of years you realize how much has flown through. And I'm essentially a guy born and brought up in Delhi. After my school and college from Delhi University, I had the fortune of being a management trainee with the Shriram Group, and these were campus interviews, and those days very coveted ones. A salary of 1450 rupees could just delight you more than many more thousands and lakhs today. And everybody thought I had probably the best job going in the marketplace, and I should not pursue my MBA at that stage or my post-graduation and probably keep it for a later date in life. And that's how I went and joined the Shriram Group, manufacturers of Usha fans and sewing machines. I did that for about a year and a half and realized that probably it was too age-old sort of industry which doesn't excite me, and Xerox was setting shop in India, and Xerox was a name that you would read across only in international magazines, and a story that was really a cult story any part of the world. It was a Fortune 500 company coming to India, and that was very exciting. Those products those days were probably ahead on the curve, and I thought that's what I want to do. And next thing I realized was I joined that company, and I didn't know how the next 14 years went. I think doing a new job every year and a half, 2 years, I was really on a S curve, on a career path. And I think there are very few who've had the fortune of what I've done in that organization, really moving into different roles, up the hierarchy. And the fortunate part came that my education got paid as well. So it was when I was the national director for a large part of company's business that they were looking for globally competent leaders. And at that stage, Xerox had an international scheme where they would pick up people, and fortunately, I was the first guy from India who got picked up for that. And they gave me two choices. They said, either you go to Rochester and work for 3 years, and you'll be moving around, with upwardly mobile people to make sure we put you on a escalator as far as your career is concerned, or you go and pursue further education in any global school. So I thought that was a dream which was unfulfilled, left somewhere. Let me catch up. Although I did go to FMS for 1 year in between to pursue my marketing management, but that was not truly an MBA degree or a postgrad degree that I had picked up. So, I said good opportunity. But after having worked for 12 years, to go and sit back and do your GMATs again can be very painful. I took about 2-3 weeks, just studied about 2-3 weeks. And got some, I don't remember, I think 680 or something like that, which was good enough. It got me admission into 2-3 schools, and I was looking at more at a 1-year program rather than a 2-year program. So all European programs were 1-year programs. I got at IMD Lausanne, Cranfield, and I had a Sloan management program for the subsequent year. Now Sloan was the best program, but I knew if they change their mind in a year's time, probably I'll be left loose. So let me go and pursue whatever best I can for this year. So I picked up Cranfield. I was in Cranfield because the average age groups in that school are generally people with 10-12 years of experience. So 35 was the average age group, and that put me into a cushy chair because I was 33, 34 at that time, and therefore I went and pursued my management. Being a sales marketing guy, I actually specialized in finance and strategy, which was very different from what I had been doing, but that was a great challenge. So the moment I came back to India, and I had a job because it was fully sponsored. I'd also signed a bond because they paid a huge amount of money for my education. That's when I had completely changed aspirations. I wanted my boss's job, and my boss wasn't going anywhere, so I had to move out. Telecom was just about happening in the country, and the only familiarity I had with telecom was I launched fax machines for Xerox in this part of the world, and that was a pioneering effort when they were moving from a document from a photocopying company to a document company. And while doing that, I knew what telecom could do, and Sunil Mittal was a very small name in this country. I always say he had 1.5 licenses, one license for Delhi and half a license for Himachal, which was a very, very small place. Nobody knew what telecom will happen there. And he started meeting me, and there were very funny interviews that happened. We met 2-3 times, and each time he would talk and I would listen. And he would be convincing me to say, why should I join him? Because that was the first set of professional that he was trying to induct into the company. British Telecom owned 44.5% of that company at that time. And as I was preparing for my plans to move over to telecom, my game plan was that I work for Xerox. It's a global company. British Telecom is a very respected name. It's a matter of time. They'll go and buy out Sunil Mittal, and it's good to work for British Telecom. So that was the whole game plan. Rest is history. We bought them out and they didn't buy us out. Last 15 years probably have been the most exciting 15 years in my life, for having built telecom step by step in India and outside India, to have learned the ropes along with everybody else. I'm not an engineer, but anybody who interacts with me in the telecom world anywhere thinks probably I'm an engineer. It's as you pick up things when you grow up. I think we've been very, very fortunate. I further enhanced my education. I did my advanced management at Wharton, and again somebody else paid for it. So I've been very fortunate. Other than my graduation, somebody's paid for my education. And as I was coming over, obviously there was that conflict about what happens to that bond that I'd signed. So Sunil Mittal had to pick up that bond and cover that up. Hopefully nobody else had to pick up the bond that he spent on. I think we were very fortunate to have built one of world's enamoring story, and I'm very thankful that I've been a part of that build up, moving the company into 4 different businesses that I used to manage: mobile, fixed line and broadband, international wholesale, and DTH. So while I was creating a very large business, which was a multi-billion-dollar business, I was also nurturing some small businesses that outside world probably is less appreciative or aware of. So DTH, a business that I started from scratch, today is valued at close to $1.6-1.7 billion. Although no sale has happened, but that's a story that we stitched in 5 years' time. And it is, I think, one of the fastest growing startups that anybody can talk about. We developed Airtel Money, that very few people know. It was a financial services business, not a telecom business, which again flows through about 400 crores of flow through that pipe every month. So it's a largest business. Airtel Online, which was zero till about 4 or 5 years back, is today a $1 billion business. So about $1 billion worth of business happens online. So these are all new initiatives that we nurtured within a large organization. So it was best of both worlds. It was entrepreneurial always, and it allowed us to create a very large global business that was grown both organically and inorganically. So I think I've been exceedingly fortunate. But like every professional, after you live a journey for 30 years, you want now a new kick in life to say, what do I want to do that I have not done earlier, and I think when you work for large organizations, there are people who get bitten by this entrepreneurial bug, and I had a similar bug. I wanted to do something where, rather than creating value for others, as I call, although I did create value for myself, it will be wrong on my part to say that, but I thought I could create value once again on a more entrepreneurial endeavor. So Sunil and me, despite of having very, very passionate discussions, because we are both very fond of each other, we finally decided that it's best for me to move on. And when I moved on, I started looking at what's happening on the entrepreneurial world outside. So meeting with PEs, funds, who's who of this country, having a dialogue to say what's going on. And that was not the best period. It was that period. I moved from Airtel May of 2013. So it's just been a year and a quarter, a little over a quarter. And at that stage, I'd virtually identified that data is the space I want to be in, and that's where I want to nurture my future endeavor. and I'd spotted certain areas where I could either buy out a company or buy into a company, or organically grow something. So finally, we were at a stage where we were about to buy out something and move ahead, and I had backing of the right people, who wanted to invest behind me. And while that was happening, I had a PE fund approach me to say, have you heard of these guys called Micromax? I said, of course. They've done well over the past few years. But I remember that when they were nurturing this business, I was one of the guys sitting on the other side saying, I don't see these guys have any future, because it looks tough. But that's how entrepreneurs are. They always bet on risky things, which are then converted by their shared passion and capabilities into reality that excites and surprises everybody. So these guys came and approached me and said, look, if you start off doing something which will be 80 million, 100 million, it'll take you 10 years to build it to $1 billion, right? And you're a guy who's used to a very large scale, 15, 20 billion dollars. So we have something on the ground which is $1 billion, $1.5 billion. Can we grow it 5x, 10x? And you come and be a part owner of the company, and for who you are, we all look upon you. They're all young guys, and you be our boss. Now that's a big thing for an entrepreneur to come and tell you and be our boss, right? Because nobody appoints his boss. They are entrepreneurs because they want to be their own bosses, right? But I think they had the vision to say our capabilities can take us to a place and we need help beyond that. I think Mr. Sunil Mittal identified that way back when he was professionalizing his company as well. And he was a youngster himself at that time. I'm talking 97, 98. So I think all these guys somewhere realize, how much they can do themselves and where all they need other people to come and join hands. And rest is history. I mean, now it's been close to 3 months. I've been pursuing this new entrepreneurial hat. While I do that, I sit on boards of several companies, including Bennett, PVR. I advise a couple of global companies. In the past, I have played active role at CII. I have been the chairman of Cellular Operators Association of India for 2 years. I have sat on the global board of GSMA for 4 years. So I think life's been very interesting. I have grown up kids, 2 boys. One of them is pursuing his postgrad in US, and the other one's pursuing his undergrad in London. So my wife is a homemaker, and I think coming from a middle-class family, having lost my father when I was 8 years old, my mother brought me up as a single parent. I think the God's been exceedingly kind, and the environment's been exceedingly conducive for me to have had such terrific opportunities in life. And I hope the life ahead continues to be good, and I can add more value both to the businesses that I work for and give back and pay back to the society as I develop myself.
I don't have such an iconic story as Sanjay does, but my life actually turned when I gave up my job. Started my career as a management trainee in Bata, in Calcutta, and then I was posted to Delhi, and my first job was in Delhi as a store manager in a shop in Paharganj. It was actually a store where if you spread your hands, you could touch both the walls. I hadn't told anyone at home that this is what I was going to be doing, because my folks knew I was going to be a management trainee in a big company. But this was a shop where the only people who came were, the ones who were trying to board a train and they lost 1 foot of their chappal. So they came and picked up the other one. So your only job was to time yourself with the timing of the key trains and stand out with a size 6 or a size 7 Hawaii chappal. But that is where one started, then became, got an opportunity to launch a brand inside Bata, which was a sports brand called Power. It was a non-existent brand. Very proud. I think that's one of my biggest learnings. Built it into a brand which till date is one of the strongest brands for Bata. I think one of the first ones who tried using a very different route to market and create a brand, and which was use cricket. I still remember sitting at Firosha Kotla with a couple of the cricketers. I don't want to name the guys, but requesting them if I could remove the stickers from their bat of the bat manufacturer and put a Power sticker on it. And that's where the journey started, to a point where we were endorsing, and we had brand endorsements from just about the entire cricket team, and built a solid brand. From there I moved on to Benetton as the head of sales and marketing for the SAARC countries. So initial years was all in physical retail. Thereafter, I got this great opportunity of joining an FMCG, a big brand, so I joined Pepsi. Was their executive vice president sales for 7 years. That was again an amazing learning, because from a physical world to get into an S&D, brand. But these were mundane, regular jobs to some point. I mean, you were growing. Don't know whether you were growing because of your own capability or the badge value of the company took you forward, but you were growing. I think in a large organization, unlike Sanjay, I came across a situation where I knew my career was now getting stunted. I was at a situation where I did realize that if I hang around, I'll be doing the same thing for maybe a few years, and a lot of people will move on. That was a time for me, which was in 2007, where there was a desperate need to really re-engineer my own skill sets and figure out what I really wanted to do. I had two options, either take on another job, and I did get an opportunity with Airtel then as well. So either take on a job in a retail organization or in the telecom sector, or try and do something radically different. I think it was a liquidy night. I took a decision after a couple of drinks, but it did work out very well, because many things work out well not because you planned them out, but also by accident. And this one was, I think, one hell of a good accident. So the thought came that, listen, can we build a television channel which can move from purely eyeballs and TRPs to transactions? It sounded like a fascinating idea. It was something that I'd never done in my past, and I took that on as a challenge. It was a tough one, and just to give you an example of how tough it was then, I still remember going back home, sitting with all my folks, my family, and telling them, listen, I've quit Pepsi, and I'm going to do something different. So obviously everyone wanted to know, what are you going to do? My dad knew what I was trying to do. So other than him, nobody else did. And I didn't have the guts to tell anyone also, honestly. So when I said that, listen, I'm quitting Pepsi and I'm going to be joining this company called TV18. My mom actually didn't even know what TV18 did. So she said, are you going to be selling TVs? I said, no, I'm not going to be selling TVs. So I gave her some brand names. She was a little comfortable. So then she said, what exactly are you going to do there? So I said, I'm going to start a home shopping channel. And there was an honest lull which happened. And before I knew it, my mom started crying. So I पूछा हुआ क्या आपको आप रो क्यों रहे हो? She said, listen, मैं इतने proudly अपने friends को बोलती थी मेरा बाटा पेप्सी में है, अब तुम सोना बेल्ट बेचोगे. So it was that is where this journey really started. It was a pretty difficult one, because yes, the perception of home shopping was about this white woman speaking in Tamil saying मेरा पेट अंदर हो गया, right? It was about Rudraksh, and it was about apply this in your head and your hair springs out, and it was about magic rather than anything genuine. So there was no consumer confidence. To top it all, there was no domain knowledge. I certainly was clueless. I'd never even stepped into a television studio prior to that. Obviously, nobody had ever invited for a session like this also. So, but there was no domain knowledge, there was no consumer confidence, and we didn't know what to do. But luckily, I think this has been one of the most enjoyable experiences of my last, in my last 7-8 years. Everything that I had learned prior to this, I think I've tried to unlearn it, because things are so different. Everything that I'm learning now, I'm also compelling myself that don't make that learning a habit, because you might have to change it very quickly, and that's coming true. Nothing seems to be constant for more than 6, 8, 10 months. And there are so many examples. There are so many examples. Just to give you one simple one, you know, Network 18 told me that, listen, we know television, we'll help you build television. So I said, fair enough, help me do that. So the first task of building the television channel and a learning from me was to find an anchor and a producer. So we did an anchor hunt on one of the channels, and I remember me and another very senior person in Network 18, we did this anchor hunt in Bombay and Delhi, and we auditioned 975 people. Out of those 975 people, I couldn't even identify one anchor. I got to meet a lot of pretty faces, a lot of nice people, but I also realized that if you have to build a home shopping business, it's not going to be a classical recruitment of an anchor. Why? Because, and don't misunderstand me, but a standard television anchor is either a pretty face, comes from a theatrics background, or is a script reader. But out here you needed an anchor which was an intelligent human being who could convert a product into a sale. So you needed a normal person with a lot of intelligence, not necessarily somebody who could read a script. So what did we do? After 1 year of hunting all of this, then I said, let's go to the radio industry. And I hired about 8 or 10 radio jockeys because they could talk very well and they were desperate to get their mugshots on TV. So that is where we started that entire journey. And I think there have been enough things that we've tried to literally break the rules, reinvent. From a stage where we didn't know who would buy, what would they buy, would we be able to sell in a tier 2 or a metro or any particular geography. I think pretty proud to say that we today have a team of about 2,000 people. We do a transaction every 3.5 seconds. We built a decent business, not a very visible one. We do about 2,500 crores of turnover. And from a situation where we didn't know what would sell, today we sell about 250,000 mobile handsets every month. We sell about 10,000 saris in an hour. We sell about 30 tons of rice in an hour. Everything that I personally thought we could never sell, today people are buying. So we've willy-nilly, through a lot of accidents, built a reasonable business, and one that I'm pretty excited and proud about.
has this guy gone crazy or what is he trying to do? But how difficult was it to take that call?
Listen, the call was taken, and one stood by that call, and I'm glad I did. But it was after the call that the problems began. I think the first 4 to 5 months, every day I'd get to work and crib and question my own wisdom or thinking. Listen, it was a wonderful job, a large organization like a Pepsi. You work on some, most of your time you're driven by PPTs and AOPs and strat plans. And you work on things like that. But out here, and you have a secretary who looks after your travel, and there are systems which take care of everything. And out here, I was given a small little cubicle which was as big as this table, which was in the dispatch and the courier section, so with nobody else around you. So every day I used to question why I did what I did. But I think when you've got your back against the wall, you fight back, and at least didn't give up, and it's kind of turned out all right. But it was a tough decision.
So I think my circumstances and my pivotal point is a little different from Sandeep's pivotal point, and he emphasized that as well. But yes, we are all emotional beings at the end of the day. We get emotionally involved with companies that we work for, the brands that we create, and I'd be lying if I was to say that the Airtel in me can never die. It can never die. It'll always remain. Some brands have such ardent fans. You see the war between Pepsi and Coke. A Coke person, even if he's left Coke 10 years back, will never drink Pepsi, right? And vice versa for Pepsi guys. They will not even have Pepsi and Coke coming into their homes, if they've not worked for those companies. So I think those affiliations happen. So I always will remain a brand ambassador of Airtel no matter what I do, because I've created that baby from virtually zero, right? And so that's always going to remain. But for me, it was a more cautious decision to say, I do not want to do a corporate role again. And therefore, what entrepreneurship brings on the table, I think I was pretty well versed with. I knew what I'm getting into. I think these things like, obviously when you work for a large company, a multi-billion-dollar company, you have 8 guys who look after your office. You got a large, office which looks like, it can be ostentatious at times as well, right? But the moment you get into more entrepreneurial setups, which are smaller in size, these things come. But there are trade-offs, right? And you have to be sure what are you hunting and what are you looking for. But if you are wearing your ego and everything on your sleeve, then don't make a move, right? But one thing that I realize in a very short span in time is, as I see the talent on the entrepreneurial side of things, I truly believe that people who are suited to develop these complex businesses and can do a lot more to these businesses are probably sitting in this room. People like yourselves who work for corporate organizations, but over time these guys have become slaves of EMIs and fixed salaries, and you can't blame them. And to give that up and to move on into this new dimension is not that easy. It's tough. but more and more people are doing it. I think these capabilities are getting transported. You know, I was talking to a few people this morning to say, till few years back, nobody from IMA, IMB, IMC used to look at entrepreneurship or startups. Look at it now. This year, 20% of the people at IMA have gone in for entrepreneurship or startups. This phenomena is going to change. I was in the Valley, just about 4-6 weeks back, and every guy walking on the street has $1 billion dream, right? Because that's what is nurturing over there. 15 engineers, 1,200 square feet of office, an idea, and $1 billion, right? That is going to come here. It is going to come here, right? It is slowly happening because the new age businesses that are getting created, fortunately, unfortunately, 60-70% of the wealth of this country lies with 60 or 70 families, right? And the new age businesses that are coming across somehow have gone beyond the realm of these 60-70 families, right? Neither are they interested in those businesses, I don't think, nor do they relate to these businesses very closely, right? So this has gone into a new breed of professionals and newer minds, and these guys are going to create, share, build, set examples, and invigorate many others to chase similar dreams. I think India will see that happening with what's happening to the economy right now and the environment that's getting created. I think this ecosystem will come of age. This ecosystem will come of age. The Flipkarts, the Jabongs, the Micromaxes are all examples that are going to invigorate and excite a lot of people to say, why the hell can't I do it, right? And it's about an idea, and then somebody who backs that idea. I think that ecosystem is getting created. So I guess my decision was under different circumstances, so I'm not surprised by anything because I had my eyes wide open, right? And so everything looks easier from where you look at it from. So from my perspective, I think I had crossed that hump in my life of being slave of EMI, or I had crossed that hump, right? So I did it. If I would have done it a little later, probably I would be singing a different story today. But I had crossed that. But there are many people like me who, even after crossing, feel now, what the hell am I doing? I'm 50 now. Why am I wanting to make this move? So it's your risk appetite. It's your risk appetite. What do you want to achieve in life? And of course, things will be different. All environments can't be same. All businesses can't be same. All countries can't be same. All geographies can't be same. You'll have to take that punt. But it's one life, right? Do you want to live that life doing different things? Are you happy? And there is no right or wrong on this. It's each to himself. Some people are happy doing one. There are others like me who want to do different things in life. So I think the world is changing in a very positive manner, especially with the advent of internet and online that has really caught the imagination of everybody across the globe. I think this is bringing in an environment of frenemies, and frenemies are friends and enemies. So the same guys you are competing with and the same guys you are befriending. Right? And this is a very typical thing that is going to hit a large amount of businesses, because there's no point trying to build wasteful expenditure around areas where you do not get a competitive edge. Right? For example, telecom led this bandwagon in India. Towers are not what are going to give us an advantage, so let's share towers. Right? Passive infrastructure is not going to give us advantage, so let's share passive infrastructure. Right? I collaborate with the same guys that I fiercely compete with. Is Google going to win the war versus telecom operators, or telecom operators are going to get an edge over Google? I think the world is such a large space that it's not him or him, it is both. I think if you start competing, come to some sort of an agreement, a new business model, you'll find ways to survive in an environment that will build frenemies. We as HR people have to understand how this is going to impact our people, our hires, our development, because you will have to have people in future who will have to survive in a frenemy sort of an environment versus cutthroat. I'll kill this guy no matter what, Coke, Pepsi, 5 rupee bottle and chota bottle and something else. I mean, they're fearful, right? There is no collaboration that happens. For all you know, they might be running 2 plants at 2 different capacities. I'm not suggesting, I'm not an expert on colas, and I'll refrain from that. But I think every industry will face this sort of a dilemma. This next big change, and I think you talk about it to say these millennials and how do we deal with that, but I think I don't see that as a challenge. The challenge that I see is that we are moving from experience to relevance, and that's a big change that's happening. I think gone are those days where you could be sitting, creating an organization and saying, I need 20 years experience guy to do this job. I need 30 years experience guy to do this job. You can only be a CEO when you've slogged your whatever for 35 years. It's not going to work like that because it's relevance. What's the fun of trying to reinvent a wheel somewhere where a guy can do things better than you, right? I chair Micromax, but I do not know probably 10% of what a youngster knows on devices, right? You and me, or some of you, I mean many of you are very, very young. Some of you like me still need to read a manual to understand how a gadget works. Yeah, go to a youngster, he doesn't need any gadget to figure it out through a manual or something. He can do it through hit and trial much quicker than you and I can. So I think this relevance thing, and are you willing to give up? Are you as organizations going to say both will survive? There are some jobs that will require experience, but most jobs will require relevance as you go forward. And if X is relevant, he's relevant no matter he has experience or he doesn't have experience. Are you ready for that? If you don't do it, somebody else will do it. That's how things are changing. And the third thing, a little while back, people used to ask us, 100 million customers, 200 million customers, how do you manage it? What gives you sleepless night? And this was my perennial answer when we had not reached 100 million. My big problem is scale. How do I develop scale? Because I have no benchmark. Most of the countries have population of only 50 million, 60 million, 70 million. Who do I learn from to say I want to scale up this company to 100 million customers? So it was hit and trial all the time. We were creating our own systems, creating our own IT, creating our own, whatever. And it was hit and trial, so those sleepless nights were coming from scale. But as you build these organizations, and today somebody was to come and ask me, so given the environment, what is your biggest challenge? I think my biggest challenge now is complexity. And let me explain this to you. Can you imagine a telecom company, and this applies to many other industries, I can replicate the same example. There's a telecom company, there's a financial services company, there's an entertainment company, because we also sell more music than anybody else sells in the country, right? We are the largest music company compared to anybody else. We are also a health company because we sell health services, and we have doctors and medical practitioners who run that environment, right? We have bankers who run the financial services company, and then we have the media where DTH are different types of people. So you hire bankers in your organization, they want different types of salaries. You can't compete on salary with the telecom guys. You tell them to entertain somebody outside, they want expensive wines to be served on the table because that's the culture that they've come from. You hire people for media, their day starts at 12 noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, ends up later, but the organization meetings, are all over. So these guys are isolated. How do you deal with them? So I think managing this sort of a diversity creates such a complexity in an organization that many organizations are not ready for it. Now you'll say, how does it apply to my organization? Very simple, it applies to your organization. Do you realize that when an iPod was created, right, it did not only change how music was heard, it also changed how automotive companies started redesigning cars to make sure there are contraptions where you can listen to music. Nike redid the entire apparel chain to make sure you could listen to music while you're running, while you're swimming, while you're squatting, blah, blah, blah. So today, changes that happen impact many other industries, right? And if you are not watching this complexity, you're in trouble. So I think we are clearly moving from a scale to complexity. The third and important, I think, is this whole data tsunami that is hitting the world. This is for real. An average Indian is going to consume 1000x of data in the next 10 years, whether you like it or not. Some of it will happen because the gadgetry that you're using, because the environment around you, because there's more content, but most of it will also happen because the form of the content is changing. It's not that you are just watching 10 films and you are watching one film. You might be watching only 2 films, right? But you were watching a standard definition yesterday, you're watching a high definition today, you'll watch a 3D tomorrow. Each one of them is a 10x multiplier on what I just said. Now you're saying, what the hell is he saying? You know, how does that make a difference to people, and what happens? Very clearly, the difference that it makes is now you have to start seeing the world in a different angle. I would say the world is getting divided into 3 categories of people, to simplify it to that extent. So there are data natives, there are data immigrants, and there are data aliens, right? And many people are data aliens who are probably on the wrong side, and they'll find it very tough to survive. Jobs to them after 50 years of age, each guy is going to face a lot of problem, whether he likes it or not, no matter which industry he's in. Data immigrants are guys like me, right? I was born in the baby boomers era, but I worked very hard to understand data. I actually invested time. I played around, but made sure I remain relevant. If I become irrelevant, there's nobody to blame. But many of you could fall into the category of immigrants, to say, I will immigrate into that space. And data natives, I don't have to explain to you, to say these are the guys who are born with data. They can play with 5 devices simultaneously. They can play a game in India with somebody sitting in United States of America, blah, blah, blah. All that will happen, right? But this is for real. So how does it impact your organization? First and foremost, I think as HR people, with so much of data that will be flowing with you, you will need deep analytics. This is something that was only the domain of financial guys or domain of marketing guys earlier. Now it is the domain of a HR guy today. Today you do a referral check with somebody, and what happens? You say, "Jaake reference check karke aao." And what does he do? That guy gives you the name. This guy calls that guy whose name has come from this guy, and then what do you expect that guy to tell you? That he's all rotten, because they've already agreed, what they're going to say, right? But we go through that motion. Today you don't have to do that. Online has so much information about each guy. If a guy tells you, I'm a very hard working guy, I really work hard, and then you figure out, ye 4 baje tak to internet pe hota hai, right? So, when does he work hard, right? How does he come and attend office next morning? So, what time you wake up, what time you sleep, what sort of sites you visit, what are the friends you have, what do you do on Facebook, all this is real time available. If you do not have analytics in your organization to cut through this, you'll find it difficult. And you'll have to start segmenting your people into finer segments to be able to draw differentiation on managing people in one organization versus another organization. Engaged communities is not an internet phenomena, it's going to be a phenomena within the organization as well, because you're not going to move away from having employees to having communities, right? And how do you engage with those communities? How do you positively, obviously you don't want them to be chatting, but there are many other ways to engage with communities. And if you don't have engaged communities, you're going to have people move out of the organization, right? It's going to happen. Bring your own mobile devices is a part of the life. You will not be able to cater to providing devices to people as organizations, because the life cycle of the devices is shortening so quickly that you cannot replenish them. So best is leave these guys. The next problem, how do I securitize? How do I make sure, they don't spend all their time? Well, we'll have to figure that out. There are no straight answers, but answers are emerging, on all these things. And the other one that I want to talk about is, what was said this morning is, career options up to now have been very straightforward. I will move from X organization to Y organization, Z organization to another organization. But we've never had a climate where people have wanted to become entrepreneurs, right? This is another area that will come up, where people will come and tell you, I actually don't want to work for you. I want to work for myself, right? How do you retain that guy? Or how will you abstain people from moving, or good people from moving? Better and better people, higher class people are going to move towards entrepreneurship. How do you retain them? I think you will have to redesign your organizations to make sure, do we really have an entrepreneurial culture? Do we empower people? Do we give them what it takes to Are we willing to share profits with them going forward? That's not your decision. Probably your shareholders will take this decision, but this will be on the table. If Google retains the best talent, if Facebook retains the best talent, because they share wealth with these guys, right? Every guy is a hook, right? It's only when he wants to do something really outside that he says, "Now I'm going," and then you can't stop him, right? I think we will go through that metamorphosis as well, and organizations will have to begin to look at many of these things going forward. So I think these are the tectonic shifts that are happening. We'll have to be cognizant. There are no easy answers. I don't have all the answers either, but I think this is a different debate that's coming, because the environment in 2020 is going to be very different from where we are.
Especially since everyone's an HR person out here, I think the role of the HR person also needs to be looked at. You'll have to give up your regular grading, HR, 360 degrees, all of that, and become more strategy and business managers. Simply put, because the industry is changing so rapidly, and like Sanjay mentioned, the shelf life of technology is now getting shorter and shorter. But the shelf life of not just technology, even organization structures is getting shorter and shorter, because the business are just evolving so quickly. New things are happening every 3 months, 6 months. You never thought of an idea, and now it's germinated into a business. You need to rewrite your structure. One of the biggest things that, exciting things, or one of the biggest challenges is that, at least in my business, I'm getting confronted with the need to rewrite the org structure literally every 6 months, which is a very painful situation, but that's the reality. I'm constantly getting confronted by individuals who earlier used to ask me maybe in 3 years or 4 years that what's next for me. Now the same individual in 6 months is saying, okay, what's next for me? The appetite to grow and the ambition to grow is very good, but you have to have answers for that. And I think the business head and the HR head have to be so deeply entrenched in the strategy and how the business is growing. Otherwise, we'll be left with literally no answers for anyone. What's also becoming critical, and this is from my experience, is that we were giving too much importance to functional skills and backgrounds. I think I personally am now giving equal weightage to attitudinal attributes as much. Meeting a person and trying to assess whether he's got the fire in his belly. Is he flexible to make course corrections every now and then? Or does he come in saying that I've done this for 10 years, I know how to do it, and I will do it for you as well? I think that's not a guy for me. I'd rather have a guy who says, I don't understand this, but I'm willing to make an effort and learn. So attitudinal skills, flexibility in our org structures, getting people to be focused not on functions and roles but on tasks, and building reward and recognition plans around smaller tasks so that you keep them engaged seems to be working. But this also seems to be a very different approach to the way we used to do things earlier on. fundamentally, I think we all need to reorient our own skill sets and clear the and do a lot of unlearning of whatever we've learned so far.
The way I see it is that, like the organizational brand, um, organizational brand creation is a 360-degree activity. It's not an activity of products, it's not an activity of communication, it's an activity of a lot of things that are put together. It's the organization reputation, it's the people who work for the organization, it's the practices, governance, credibility that it follows. It's then the products and services that it has, the communication that it makes, the target segments and evangelists that it ties up with, influencers that it works for. So I think there's a complete ecosystem that creates a brand. I believe the employer brand is no different from this at all. It cannot be the responsibility of one person. It has to be the organizational responsibility. And if I was to put somebody's neck on the chopping block, I would say the CEO and the CXO of the organization have to all own the brand and the employer brand in the organization. Otherwise, you will only see partial success. You'll go and make, as an HR person, presentations at business schools, seminars, things will happen. But if the organizational belief around that is not there, it is not sustainable. And for that to happen, everybody has to walk the talk, because ultimately the brand will be a culmination of the values that you have, the vision that you create, the mission that you have, the practices that you have, the consequence management that you have in the organization, and the stories that are entailed about the organization. I think all these are going to formulate that employer brand. So I think I would put the responsibility on the top echelons of the organization, which are to be headed by the CEO, and then the CXO owns it as well. And then they get their guidance from the board, from the chairman, to make sure the HR remuneration committees give them the guidance that is required. But they need to be the custodians whose necks need to be on the chopping block if the brand, including the employer brand, was to go. I don't think the two are separate. I think they are the same.
I think the two are, you can't really segregate them. From my point of view, the team leader is the one who decides the culture of the organization. If the guy is himself not passionate about the business, you can't expect the culture in the organization to be passionate. So it starts and ends with him. And I think that's where this entire focus needs to be. one of the things that I'm facing or constantly getting faced with is, and maybe HR needs to play a role there as well. The problem isn't with the middle management and the junior management. The problem is really with the senior management. And I'll tell you why and what I mean by that. By the sheer fact that we come in with a lot more experience, we also come in with a lot more baggage. In a new age industry which is so rapidly changing, where the average age of the team is anything between 25 and 30 to be max, the culture that you have to build is not a culture that has to be built purely driven by processes, hierarchies, grades. It has to be built by more informal mechanisms. And that's where I think HR needs to play a role. Getting a team leader or a business head to stop behaving like a business head, I think is one of the most important things to do. Most bosses need to learn how to not be a boss, to be honest. And everything changes. But getting them to get out of that boss domain and becoming a mentor or a guide and just stopping your role as a guide is, I think, a very difficult thing to do. But I think if we can get that, I personally think it works the best.
And you think we've not been able to do
heads, and there'll be 10 bosses and all come with different baggage, right? But working with the team leads, working with the senior management, and letting them get a little more comfortable with the team is, in my mind, the most critical aspect of HR going forward. Because the organizations are going to require that. In a Google today, you might have an afternoon of belly dancers there. How does it matter? Right? But it's great. Sitting with your team and doing an evaluation of the last 6 months over a drink is a damn good idea. But it starts with the orientation of the way you get, you shift gear from being a support, a friend, a guide, and max a mentor rather than just being a boss. And I think HR plays a very, very important role. But it can only do that if it understands the strategy and the vision of the organization and where it's going. If it just looks upon itself as a functional role, it'll never happen.
Not reflecting on any individuals, but by and large, when I look at HR fraternity, what I see missing or what I would want them to do, which they don't do as well. I think to me, human resources has always been in my mind a line function. It has never been a staff function. I see very few HR people who have the ability of making it a line function, right? They end up being staff. And why they end up being staff, I don't understand, right? I think they need to really draw this equation with the with the CEO or whosoever, with the board, and actually have this open dialogue to say, guys, if you want me to do a staff job here, what's the excitement? There's no excitement. I should be a person who should make a direct impact on the profitability of this company, on the revenues of this company, on the new business associations of this company. And if I'm not going to play a role there, I'm wasting my time. I truly believe it's wasted time, because then you relegate yourself to becoming a coordinator. I think that's one fundamental problem that's there. The second issue that I see with HR guys is that somewhere when things don't happen, somewhere when there are gaps, they try to be on the wrong end of the stick and get the blame for everything on people's side without any rhyme or reason. And it's got a little bit of association with what I said earlier. So I believe at the end of the day, the people who can make a difference to the organization's culture, HR practices, are truly the operating guys and the line guys in the organization, right? The so-called business guys. I think most HR does not play a role to develop operations managers and business managers to becoming good HR managers. I think that facilitation role, that evangelist role doesn't happen. Instead, they start performing that role on their behalf. I think that weakens an organization, because in an organization, if 5 people, 6 people try to take the load of 13,000 people, 14,000 people, it's never going to happen. But if they are able to convert 300 line guys into becoming good HR guys, the load is going to get shared. And if that gets shared, I think truly an HR guy has done his job. I think that's another area where I see a gap. The third area where I see a little bit of gap is that many HR people, and I'm taking out the atypical guys out of this, somehow always give an impression of not being technology friendly, right? I don't think they invest enough time on either understanding the technicalities of the business or understanding the technological changes that are hitting the world, because they can use much of that to their advantage going forward, right? How can you use mobile devices? How can you use applications? How can you use new age software? How can you make your organization mobile enabled? Because everything, eventually the only computer that is going to be most pervasive in everybody's hand is this goddamn one device that everybody carries, and some carry 2 or 3 or 4, right? How this ecosystem is changing, I think they somehow refrain from this. Why? I do not know, because it's very easily doable. I explained to you, I'm not a engineer, right? But I've run only technical businesses now for good, I don't know how many years, right? It is all learnable. At the end of the day, I don't need to understand bits and bytes. I need to understand how technology can play a role and help me in improving the businesses that I run, or create businesses that I want to create, and make me more efficient, make me more profitable, make me more competitive in the marketplace. I would say these 3 things come to me very easily. The fourth thing, and I want to share this with you because this is probably straight out of the oven. So I was with Goldman Sachs about 2 weeks back, and I was with 4 other founders of the most successful e-commerce and m-commerce businesses in this country. I can't name any one of them. They're all dear friends. We were all sitting, 6 of us were there, and we were with Goldman Sachs and a global large investor. And this was a breakfast meeting that was happening at Oberoi's. And during that course of meeting, the chairman of that large global investment firm asked one question to say, what as entrepreneurs, what as leaders gives you a sleepless night? And the round robin started. I was the last guy, right? I was surprised and shocked that everybody had the same answer. The answer was people capability. This was the missing link and stuff that gives sleepless night to everybody across the table. People who are actually running businesses that most of you envy today, right? $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion. You read about these every day in the newspaper. They have one common problem, that they believe they do not have adequate talent to grow these companies. I think this is an area where I think Indian, and sorry for being so blatant, Indian HR leaders need to really up their ante. You have to see how global and how globally capable the workforce at companies like Google are. They hire best of breed people, really best of breed people. I think this is a trade-off on quantity versus quality. You hire 5 less people, but you hire the best guys. Your organization at the end of the day, no matter how much people say, process-based organization, I think that's a lot of cock and bull. I don't believe in that. I think at the end of the day, organizations are people-based organizations, because I've seen in the most robust process-based organizations, when people move, processes fall, right? Then where's the process, right? So it's all about people. If people are going to make all the difference, and that's been, at least I've always felt proud that at Airtel, if there was one competing edge that we had against everybody else in the marketplace, was we always over-engineered our management teams and had a better bench strength than anybody else in the market, right? And that was consciously done for so many years, and that held us in good stead everywhere. I think the tools that we use, the criteria that we use, I think we settle down for very average lot of people very quickly. The stringency that has come in hiring today in the Western world is really enamoring. I think we need to up our standards as HR people when we fill up vacancies and when we resource organizations. I think we have just reconciled to producing very average organizations. And this I'm just again sharing with you because it happened with me a little while back, that such seriously successful organizations, there's only one sleepless night problem, and that is I do not have the right capability that I might require to grow this organization. And that responsibility is shared with everybody else. I don't say it's only HR's responsibility, but they are the custodians of this responsibility. They must lead this, and they must show this mirror to every CEO, every CXO to say, don't hire substandard people. Don't build substandard capability. That's also because of a reason, and this is a concept I cannot leave this room without sharing. In life, there are and decisions and there are or decisions, right? Most people are very comfortable in taking and decisions, but taking or decisions is a very, very difficult job, because you have to give up something to get something, right? You have to push your leaders to take or decisions, to say, why do you want to build capability everywhere in the organization, right? Let's pick up what is strategically inclined, and that's when you get strategic, to say, let's pick up what is strategically important for us, that will change the shape of the business that we are doing. Let's put all our resources over there, and for that, we are not going to get the second best, because if you get the second best, you will be also ran, no matter how hard you try, right? Things don't happen by luck, they happen all by design at the end of the day, right? So I think those choices, and you have to push the CEOs to make those choices. Sorry, this is not an and choice, this is an or choice. Please make it. And it is only companies that will make good or choices in future will survive. And choices will only add a dhobi list which will never get fulfilled. It will be only there to fulfill your own self prophecies, nothing more than that. That's my take. Needs to go beyond people to business. If your discussion goes to a business level, you will change this perception. Will it happen overnight? It will not happen overnight, right? But it can happen. I think the discussion is too much on touchy, feely, soft things. Those are all enablers, right? The end result of any organization, whether you like it or not, is business performance, right? Let HR guys be able to demonstrate how what they did on HR actually impacted the results of the organization. The day the discussion evolves to that level, you will not have to convince people anymore, right? Because people will get convinced to say, I'm performing a business role. Right now, guys, I'm a support function. I sit somewhere. If the CEO calls me, he calls me. If he doesn't call me, then I'll say, oh, he's not a people-oriented guy, yaar. So I blame it on him. Fine, that happens. There are people who behave differently, but no CEO can afford to not be a business-oriented guy, right? So if he's going to be a business-oriented guy, you make him improve his business if you want his attention, right? Whether he's people-oriented or he's not people-oriented. Right? So get his attention to that, but let the whole discussion evolve to a business discussion and not a touchy-feely discussion alone. I'm not saying it's either or, right, on this count. I mean, there's a mix that you'll have to develop. And push it. I mean, I think you have to set standards. The standards are very, very poor, very, very poor. Today, there are very few organizations that one can stand up and say, I am really enamored by what these guys have done on the capability. Very few organizations, because it's about filling positions. Yeah, and the world is not about filling positions. You really have to go through the rigor that the organizations are following now. It is all new age organizations have picked it up so early. The number of people that have gone to Flipkart this year, Jabong this year, I mean, those guys themselves have never been to a business school, 32 years of age, started business at 25. What do they know about? But they know what is required for their business to succeed. That's what they know, absolutely. Right? You have to impinge upon that, be partners on that, and things will change. So it's chicken and egg, don't expect things to happen tomorrow. But if HR tomorrow, there are 5-6 guys who can be benchmarks, and there are benchmarks. I mean, there are guys like Santrup Mishra who are there, who perform that role. Right? There are others. I mean, I had a great guy working for me, Krish Shankar. Many of these guys, as they come up and they become the role models, you will see people opting. At the end of the day, if you really ask me, what piece of my business gives me the biggest joy, and everybody's got strengths, weaknesses, and what, it's people. I really enjoy dealing with people. That's what I enjoy the most. Right? Sure. But I don't enjoy only, having, polite conversations with them. I like having business conversations with them.
I think HR is a critical function, but exactly what Sanjay said, I think just make it into a more business-oriented function rather than just a support function. Everything will change. If more HR people can be business leaders with their KPIs on bottom line and top line as well, everything will change. I think it's just a matter of how you look at it. But I clearly don't agree that HR is losing its. And then, yes, liquidy night, we said, okay, let's do it. And then you regretted it for the next 6 months, but it worked out. No, it wasn't. It wasn't as chaotic as I'm making it sound. 2006, 2007 was an amazing time, and all of us will remember. Every industry was growing. You had mobility, you had financial services, you had media, you had advertising, and for all of us employees, it was the best time because you had 4 options, each giving you a 50% jump on salary, right? So you either had an option of going into something like that, and at that time I also had another option internally from Pepsi to move into an international territory. And run that territory, but it would have been a smaller country in comparison to India and doing more or less the same thing. This, for me, had 2 things which helped me take a decision. One, I looked upon this as, a risky but an opportunity to really become an entrepreneur with somebody else's money. And I had always wanted to do that, didn't have the money. So here there was an organization which was willing to back you and put some money on the table, which was great. It was a domain which I thought straddled media, entertainment and retail. So I thought कि चलो करके देखते हैं. If nothing else, I might then expand my horizons and find a job in either media, entertainment and retail, which was my background. And third, with the tele-shopping, it couldn't have got any worse, na? So if you did the job right, you would only hopefully change perception. So there were positives in the whole thing. But fundamentally, it was important for me to test myself as an entrepreneur, and I was driven by the fact that you needed to re-engineer your own skill set. And I think I'm again getting driven in that same domain, because having done this for 5-7 years, the market has changed. Our skill sets on digital are so different to what they were even 5 years ago. I'll give you a small example, and this is again people related. Supply chain, a classical role. Very easily there are supply chain experts in the country, but I'm not being able to find one, because most supply chain guys come with the baggage of a B2B model. Supply chain is truckloads, distributor, wholesaler. In our case now, supply chain is an individual invoice and an individual product across 4,500 cities. So what kind of skill sets do you get? Analytics. Everyone's been talking about building BI and stuff like that. We've got all of that. But analytics is about finding a handful of good thinkers It's about a few good guys who know how to decipher data with no historical background and yet be able to forecast. So it's again time to, at least for me, and I'm requesting part of the team also, to again unlearn and start learning and imbibe new skill sets.
Uh, so I think we did talk about a few things, and I'm happy to reiterate some of those. First of all, can you see something in that organization that people from business are not seeing today, which can be impacted through what you control? And analytics is one way of doing it. Can you analyze and then facts go back to these guys and say, are you looking at this? Or you are able to identify trends. So sorry for that. You are able to identify trends that nobody else is able to identify, and take it to these people, and then have a dialogue around that. I think these are the only ways to draw their attention, because it doesn't seem that there's traction from the other side that is drawing you to anything that is invigorating. And if this doesn't work, then all I have to say is you are in the wrong organization, right? Because nobody is it's wasting your time. But I think in the last 5-7 years, that's a transformation that has hit the organizations that I've worked for. And this relevance thing versus experience thing is a gospel that is catching up across the organization. And more people are imbibing this. To walk your talk is not easy, but you need to build a culture where people must be able to shake somebody's collar if this doesn't happen, right? To say, if I have a job and I think X guy is more relevant, don't get into the hold of, why, but a lot of people will come back to you. The question is not this. They will agree for probably a relevant guy. The problem comes when you have to compensate that guy. To say, how do I now pay him a salary which is different? I think that's the bitter truth, or the bitter pill that you have to swallow. And if you can make that happen in your organization, then you've succeeded. Otherwise, what will happen is older people will get replaced by younger people and at lesser salaries. So it's the same stuff. But if you can design a path where you say, and many people do this. So for example, we used to do this. We hired these management trainees from business schools and all, creme de la creme schools, and they would take X number of years before they became a circle head. We reduced that by 50%. Right, to say, no, in half the time they have to go there because they are the most relevant guys to do that job. Right? Can you build those shortcuts? And those are internal shortcuts that you build. And then this gives you the liberty, because when you hire from outside, then you can hire straight away into that position with somebody who's more relevant but has done lesser. And then some jobs for which you will actually find it very difficult to fit any other talent into those. This also requires a tough decision to say, I ask a lot of people in the organization then to say, sorry, I don't have a role for you, right? Now there are two ways. Do you want to be seen as an organization that is going to be firing people, right? And what will you do at the end of the day? This is a social problem that we have in hand. At the end of the day, there's a section of the society that is becoming older and older on one side, although we have 50% youth in this country, and the other challenge is that longevity is going up. Right now, an average Indian lives, 75, 80 years, and another 25 years, an average Indian will live 10 years more, right? Because of better health, better awareness, blah, 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 all that stuff. Now, what do you do? If you ask a guy to retire at 50, how is he going to live his life? He'll die, poor guy, of hunger and starvation with the inflation that's there. So I think the truth is somewhere in between, where we have to carve out those jobs to say, these jobs, no matter what, relevance is important in these jobs, no matter what, or you have a way of rehabilitating these guys. We'll have to figure that out. You can't leave these guys lurching on the road, right? I mean, that is not the objective. But very clearly, I think, start with, you cannot, wo sare ghar ke badal dalunga will not work, right? It will take some time. Identify with jobs and say, these jobs now do not matter, how many years of experience. We are going to get the right guys who know this, who can do this job in their sleep. Make those changes, the message will go down the organization, and then things will begin to happen. I think there's no other easy way.
At times, just looking at a completely different industry also works. And it's sort of worked for us. I'm glad there is conflict when you take these decisions, because if there wasn't conflict, there would be complacency, right? And conflict actually helps you think through a little harder and take much difficult decisions, which always works out. Entrepreneurial, let me just step back. I think we are over-analyzing and overthinking this. There's so much going on, and there is so much that will carry on, I think, for the next 5 years. After that, there will be a little bit of a lull, because most industries, winners will kind of get established. But there is a difference that's happening. In the West, and just as an example, in the West, especially in the US, if you see the way the retail evolution has happened, the mom and pop shops of the 50s moved to the Walmarts and the large formats of the 70s, then television shopping of the QVCs in the 80s, and then the Amazons and the internet of the 2000s. It's taken 5 decades. In India, all of this seems to be happening in a span of 2 to 3 years, right? The entire cycles got compressed. So many things. There's a Walmart, there's a QVC, there's an Amazon. Everything seems to be getting developed at the same time. Because of which, entrepreneurs are uncertain of all. I mean, if you're asking me a question, very difficult to have all the answers out. Even the consumers are uncertain. All the more reason, guys coming out of universities and institutes are also going through that phase, right? So this is, I mean, you can look at it whichever way. This is a very, very exciting phase. It's a phase where you can take your chances now, because the ecosystem of investors, society, your parents, and prospective future employers all are looking positively at you being an entrepreneur, right? So I personally think it's a great time for people who are wanting to be entrepreneurs to take the plunge and try it. Yes, 20% are doing it. Out of that, only 5% actually go ahead with it. Maybe only 2% of that succeed, but it's still worth it.
You know, two live examples that you know I can share with you to say what organizations are doing, or what I have had the fortune of doing. So one is for people who you don't want to go, because you want to retain them. If you give a green flag to everybody, you want to become an entrepreneur, go, then maybe you lose a lot of talent. So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you create an entrepreneurial environment inside the company that people feel okay, they need to stick on. So I think 2 things that worked for us. One was we took up this employment brand motto to say jobs never done before. We will create jobs that are not available outside. So we'll create such like jobs in the organization, which will be very entrepreneurial in nature. And we created a lot of these jobs inside the organization. So some of the people went for those jobs and they were happy and they said, okay, this is entrepreneurial. Second, change the entire compensation to more risk reward, right? Where you are able to reward people who perform exceedingly well, disproportionately compared to people who also ran. I think this is another thing that we did in the organization. But for the people who we were certain we are going to lose, we actually designed an entrepreneurial policy in the company. So what we said was, rather than being an entrepreneur in a field which is outside what we do, be an entrepreneur in a field that we know. And if you be in that field, then we will give you a habilitation route. So we will train you, we will give you compensation. So for example, 6 months of compensation, 8 months of compensation as he settles down in his role, and even a soft loan for him to pay back as he earns from his business. So not very many people applied for it, but I know at least 10-12 people who availed of that facility. So these are some of the mitigation techniques that you can use, that rather than losing them to the outside world, lose them to your internal ecosystem. But you will see this changing. What is over and above everything else, what are people fearful of is availability of money. Will I be funded when I go? I have an idea. And that's why 5% of the people are a little reluctant. And maybe some others, like I said, have the burden of dealing with EMIs and all that stuff to say, how will I make my ends meet from tomorrow onwards if this money, because most people don't have very big savings, right? But I think this whole ecosystem is going to change. The way these seed funds, embryonic funds are coming down, you will see more people writing $25,000, $50,000, $100,000 checks very quickly, right? And a great ecosystem exists in the western part of the world. You go down to California, go down to Mountain View, you'll see a company called 500 Startups. What this 500 Startups does is, there's a large building. In that building, there are desks, and each desk is an entrepreneurial desk. It's a company. There are 5 guys sitting on that desk. One is the CEO, one is the COO, one is the marketing head, they're all sitting on the same table. They have a common infrastructure. These guys who are from 500 Startups take an equity into those companies, give them a startup money, and also give them know-how on technology, marketing, financials. They've never built an Excel sheet to put up financials of a company to get funded, right? They help them with all the stuff. All they have is a good idea. And to my surprise, my visit 2.5 years back, I went to 500 Startups. Every third desk or fourth desk that I visited was belonging to an Indian group, right? Somebody from Chennai, somebody from Hyderabad, somebody from Pune, somebody from Delhi, right? And each time you spoke to those guys and said, what the hell are you doing here? He says, boss, actually we had this idea in India. We went to people, nobody understood our idea. We wrote to these guys said, take a ticket, come here, we'll reimburse the money. We went there, they cut a check of $100,000 and we are in business. Chalega, chalega, nahi chalega, nahi chalega. So many of these guys, they get appreciated there. I think that's changing. You will see in the next 5 years, the ecosystem that gets developed here and the way it's changing very, very quickly. You will see a lot of this stuff happening here, where people will have good ideas, go out, convince others. Some people will write a check, they'll sell a part of their company, and off they go. This is going to be the order of the day.
Because these changes can't be stopped. It's bound to happen. I mean, forget about building internet. I personally feel the PC is going to be redundant in the next 3 to 4 years. You'll have the Micromax smartphone, There might be something else, or so you have no choice, but you have to keep changing and keep moving with that. I think as career oriented people, you've got to just take a step back every 2.5 years. And somebody said a beautiful thing to me. He said that no matter how successful your organization is, if you don't reorient the company every 2.5 years, the chances are you're going to be redundant soon. Okay? I think it's so true for individuals as well. Whatever you've learned till now isn't a guarantee that it's going to work for you in the future. So the market is changing, the dynamics are changing. The sooner you realize that and upgrade whatever you're doing, the better it is. But yes, retail is going to change. Retail is going to change. Maybe after this, catalog will come back. And it may, and it is happening. New formats of physical and online retail might begin to happen. So people are already talking about drones delivering products. So you'll have to keep reorienting everything that you're doing as often as you can.
The change might seem a little slow, but I think it has begun. You have people from Harvard now coming in, being directors of institutes in India. You know, Ashish Nanda now heads IMA. He was at Harvard. Came back. I think there's a lot of, you go to ISB Hyderabad, you'll see a different curriculum coming up. I think more proliferations of IMs is happening. There are so many new opening up. You will see a reversal. But you're right that one of the differences between the Western world and Indian universities is endowment funds. And endowment funds make a huge amount of difference because all the research work happens through those endowment funds. And there are schools in US which have billions of dollars of endowment funds. And that's even the divide in US between the top 20 schools and below the 20 schools. The endowment differences are so huge, and that's the difference even in United States of America. So I think you will see this changing. This is changing. We are better off than what we were yesterday. The pace needs to hasten, but the quality of professors, the engagement with the corporates is going up, right? It is going up. Definitive about that. You're right that many of us, I teach at some of the IMs, IIFT, others. I mean, I go conduct lectures, but how many can you do? 5 in a year, 6 in a year. You can't do more than that, right? Is there another way of engaging? Don't know. In active life, to find time for all that has been a constraint up to now. And I agree with you that there's an engagement model deficiency even from these schools to engage with you on a regular basis.
Sabbaticals?
Yeah, absolutely.
Why not you take a sabbatical from the industry and go to the
Is a
company base for your teachership?
is a thinkable proposition which has not been triggered by Indian corporates. But I do believe that the bigger problem is participation financially with these institutes. If endowments are available, there'll be 100 ways of attracting better talent. It is indeed a profound question and difficult to answer. I don't think anybody can provide you a prescription. At least I don't have the capability of giving you a prescription. All I can say is do what your heart says and do where your heart lies. If you think you should do XYZ, over something else, please go do it. Because eventually there are no right or wrong answers on these things. If you are a person who believes, no, I like processes, that's what I like doing, that's where my passion lies, go do it, right? Maybe that's right for you, and you'll find your level, if not in this organization, some other organization that will value you for your passion there. But if your passion lies somewhere else, go do it, even if it is defined to the organization, because again, you'll find your organization and level sometime, somewhere. So, it's a war between here and here. if you are trying to retain a talent that no matter after all the tricks in the trade have been tried are not going to stay, then you need a business model change. I'll go back to a telecom story here, and you've all heard what we guys did on outsourcing in this country. Nobody else did what we did, and we had the same problem. The problem had to be solved with a different solution. We are not an IT company. Everybody told us that technology is core to telecom, right? And when the network would go down, believe you me, as a CEO, all I would do is make sure that the engineering team has called up Ericsson or Nokia or Alcatel or whosoever owns that technology, because nobody in the company understands the bits and bytes and the complication of that technology. And then you wait for either a global service help center to log in, or these guys to physically come and look at the hardware if something has gone bad. And this went on for years, and still we said technology must reside within the company. Same thing happened on IT. We started controlling IT systems in the company, and we would find that every 2 years the IT guys, after getting all the training, would leave us. We tried higher salaries, we tried higher designations, they would still leave us, right? Then we realized what the hell is happening. So we figured out that actually these are not the core competence areas of our organization. They must sit outside the organization. IBM can retain this talent better than I can, and Ericsson can retain this talent better than I can. So if they can return it better than I can, and they can do an equally good job at a comparable cost, let me outsource this whole bloody stuff. I will not do it. So that brought in the whole debate on what should sit in the organization and what should sit outside the organization. I think very many times when you can't solve the solution by giving more carrots, more regular stuff, redo your business model and say, is there another way of running this business? That's the HR head I am talking about. HR people must lead to that conversation. They will not be the final signatories to that conversation and decision, but they can be influencers and people who can trigger off those discussions to say, this is emanating out of the analytics that I have seen. This is what it is. You've tried every trick in the game. It's not working. It is time for you to look at a different business solutioning and different business modeling.